Hello, my name is Alexa Phillips. Hello, Mr. Tinnell, or whoever else is watching this. This is my cell analogy for Biology 101. Yes, so let's get started. I'm using this towel as the representative of my cell that I'm going to be adding things onto. And the analogy that I'm choosing for my cell today is that the cell is like a zoo. So first off, I want to start by saying that I used sciencing.com to get an understanding of this analogy and how it could relate to some of the organelles, and then of course I made up the majority of them on my own. And then I used study.com's organelle guide to help refresh myself on some of the functions, and I used bigis.com's biology section to really see the diagram of the cell and where the organelles typically go. And then, of course, a lot of this is referenced off of the text that we have used for our McGraw Hills. So, first, I'd like to start by saying that the outside of this towel is representative of the cell wall, which is typically present in plants and fungi cells. And it is a rigid barrier that protects the cell. And I'd like to say that that is representative of the wall that goes around a zoo. That one's pretty simple, because obviously you don't want freeloaders coming into the zoo, or you don't want people that are currently inside the zoo just able to walk on out. Same with the animals. There needs to be some protection there, and so that is what the cell wall represents. And here you'll see that the edges of the towel are slightly upturned, and that is, excuse me, what that is indicative of. Sorry, that was a little cough. Next, we have the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is very similar to a towel, I think, because the cell membrane itself decides what comes in and out of the cells, and it's a flexible and thin barrier that, separates the cell from the outside area, and in the same way that a towel separates whatever it is covering from the outside area, because it'll soak up liquid. So I think that it's pretty similar to a cell membrane in that case, because, something's trying to enter the cell, it'd be coming from outside, and then it would decide if it's coming in or not, then it would go like, and go inside. And I think a towel is similar in that case, because like if I were to put liquid here, it would go inside. So next, I'm going to talk about the nucleus. And for the nucleus, I'm going to represent it with this candle lid. I chose it because it has a nice kind of circular shape, and nuclei are pretty circular, and I'm going to put it in the, kind of central area. And the nucleus would represent the zoo's owner, and it stores genetic information within an actual cell. That's its job. And it kind of gives directions to the rest of the cell, which is why I'm saying that it's the zoo's owner and manager, because, not only does it kind of own the cell and what's going on, it sends directions for what to do. It sends directions to the ribosomes, which to me would represent the zoo's workers. And so I'm going to use matches to represent the ribosomes, because ribosomes are little dots, and matches have little dots on the end, so I think it's a good way. And they're just kind of, spread out. And a ribosome within an actual cell makes protein and kind of carries and delivers messages that the nucleus sends out. And so in that way, if the lid here was the zoo's owner, then it would be telling the ribosomes or the zookeepers what to do exactly. So, and then we have the Golgi apparatus that I would refer to as the supplier for the zoo. So the Golgi within the actual cell sorts and ships proteins, and so I'd like to use, one second, I'm using these 3 mechanical pencils as representative of the Golgi, because Golgis on a diagram are kind of, just lines that are, kind of bent around each other. I don't have anything really bendy though, so I'm going to place them up here next to each other. I'll place this so you can see, and this is going to be my Golgi. And so the Golgi within the actual cell ships and sorts proteins, but within my zoo analogy, I'm going to say that it's the supplier of food for the animals and other materials that the cell could need. And it kind of helps things get around. The supplier will come and bring food where it needs to be. And so next I'm going to go on to the mitochondria. And for the mitochondria, I'm going to use this can of Diet Coke. And the reason I'm using this Coke specifically is because I know the Diet Coke sure gets me through the day. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and Diet Coke is kind of like the powerhouse of me. So I'm going to put it up here because they tend to be, you know, on the outside. Not the outside, but like the outer ring. And so within this analogy, I would say that the mitochondria represents the power generator of the zoo. So obviously zoos have lights, zoos have heating, and the mitochondria being the powerhouse and energy supplier of the cell would also be the energy supplier for the zoo itself. So next we're gonna do vesicles. So vesicles transport materials around the cell. So in the same way that the Golgi were the suppliers of food, the vesicles themselves distributes that around the cell. And for that, I'm gonna use this little remote. And so the vesicles would take, you know, the proteins and such that are being produced and allow them to distribute within the cell. So I'd like to think of these as zookeepers that specifically help deliver food to the animals, or the zookeepers that might be taking care of the animals specifically. So that'll go there. And then next we're gonna do the lysosomes. So lysosomes remove unwanted material and waste. So I kind of think of it as like a trash can within the cell, or not necessarily a trash can, but like what you do with the parts that you don't want. So if you don't need a whole piece of food, you'd remove some of that food and you would take it away. And so I'm gonna say that that is the zoo's trash can, and for that I'm going to use this candle because it's kind of trash can shaped. So I'll set that here. And again, I just think that it's representative of a trash can, and that's pretty basic. And then next I'm gonna do the vacuole. So vacuoles are basically like a big storage room for the cell. It can store water and nutrients, and I think that's very similar to just the storage room that you'd have for a zoo. So obviously, you know, whenever you're shipped all of this food and stuff, you have to have a place to put it. I'm gonna represent that with the actual box of matches itself because, you know, it's box-like and you can put stuff in it. And they're usually pretty big. Vacuoles on the demonstration pieces are pretty large, so I'm gonna set that right here. And again, I think that it's just representative of a storage room. And then next, I'm going to discuss the cytoskeleton. So cytoskeleton is present in eukaryotic cells, and it's the structure and support of the cell itself. So it, you know, kind of helps keep the cell in place, and it helps protect the organelles within it. And so with that, I'm representing using this cord here, and it would just kind of be like, you know, around the cell and such. And I think that's representative of the gates around the animals themselves. So obviously there's like the larger gate around the actual cell, but the cytoskeleton kind of protects the cell membranes themselves and provides structure to like the inside of the cell in the same way that the zoo enclosures provide structure for the inside of the zoo. Because if you were to walk through the zoo and there were to be no enclosures, then obviously animals would just be running rampant everywhere, and you don't want that. So you want that structure, which is what the cytoskeleton would represent. So I think that's it. So we covered cell wall and how it would be the wall around the zoo. We covered the cell membrane and how it represents the gate to actually get into the zoo. We covered the vesicles that help transport materials around the zoo and how that would be the zookeepers that specialize in feeding animals. We discussed the vacuoles that store water and nutrients within the cell, and in this analogy would just store the materials or food that you need for the zoo. We discussed lysosomes, which act as a trash can and waste remover for the cell. It would act as a trash can for the zoo. That's our 5. And then next 5. Mitochondria, which is the main powerhouse of the cell that provides and makes energy, and that would be the same thing as a generator for the light or the heat within the zoo. Next, the Golgi, and that, you know, sorts and ships protein within the cells in the same way that we have the food suppliers that bring food to the animals themselves. Not the workers that bring food and distribute them among the animals, but the workers that actually, you know, deliver the food itself. Then we have the ribosomes, which are like zookeepers. The ribosomes make protein and take direction from the nucleus in the same way that zookeepers take direction from the cell managers and such. And then next we have the cytoskeleton, which gives structure and support to the cell in the same way that you get structure and support from the zoo enclosures within the zoo itself. And then we have the nucleus, which is indicative of the zoo owner, stores information and directs all the worker activities. It starts the zoo, it pays for everything within the zoo, and then gets paid in return for owning the zoo. And the one thing that I have yet to mention, and unfortunately I don't have something like super small around me, so you'll have to pretend with me for a second, but the nucleolus inside of the nucleus itself would be representative of the manager. So earlier whenever I discussed it, I was referring to it as, owner/manager, but really there is a distinction because I'm talking about the nucleus being the zoo owner, and then the nucleolus, which helps to make ribosomes, really decides the stuff and transfers the nucleus's message to the ribosomes. So that is our 10 organelles, being nucleus, nucleolus, cytoskeleton, ribosomes, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, lysosome, vacuoles, vesicles, cell membrane, and the cell wall. And this all goes to show that the cell is kind of like a giant zoo. So thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your viewing of this. Have a great day.